So the next thing I want to discuss is just like there is the individual level ego. I am Rajiv. There is also a collective ego. So somebody says I'm born in Florida or I'm born in New Jersey and I come from this heritage, this is my history, my ancestors, I belong to this religion, I have this big narrative of, from original sin to salvation to whatever, to where the heaven, hell. All this is part of beliefs. This is a whole grand narrative, a whole story, which people are born into, they're taught in church or school and so on. Now, the dissolution of the ego through yoga also has an equivalent requirement in the dissolution of the collective ego.
Right.
Because this U-turn sometimes is not because of the individual ego wanting to capture and take back, hijack yoga. The individual has really done a good job of dissolving his personal ego, quite a good job. But when he returns to his culture, there is pressure from family, there's pressure from media, there's pressure from neighbors. And so instead of that Sangha where he was very safe in the ashram, now he's back into a sort of a, congregation of the church environment, or into his medical school where they're saying all this is mumbo jumbo, don't believe in all this. So he has collective ego is still there.
So
he's he's a member of that. It's a membership. So the membership says you are a member, you're loyal to us, we give you get benefits. So it's like a community where it's like a jati. There's a huge jati. The whole Western civilization is like a huge jati. So this jati has got a lot of membership benefits. So even after he's successfully gotten rid of personal ego, he's a member of this huge collective jati. So it's too big a deal to get out of it. So what happens is he begins to negotiate with them. First, he negotiates as a true yogi. He says, no, I like the yoga, I like my Ayurvedic food, I like my symbols, I like my guru, I like all that. But he begins to break down gradually if he's not very strong, because the power of this collective ego is too much, and the rewards are too much. The fear of being blacklisted and outcast and all that is too much. So he begins to compromise little by little. He starts compromising by saying, I will keep all this private. Rajivji, I'll keep all this private. I know it is true, but in public I will say something else to make them happy. So first there is a split between private and public, which is what we don't want, in fact, what the yoga says you shouldn't. So publicly he wants to play by one set of rules. So when he goes home, he talks to parents and neighbors, and he wants to be very much like they expect him to be, compliant. And privately, he is very solidly anchored in the yoga.
No, this is how it used to be in the field of yoga when I first came, very excessively like that. Because people were afraid to even say, I'm going to yoga class.
Right.
Because they thought it is like going to a psychiatrist.
Right.
You are sick.
Right.
Now, more and more people are changing. Actually, they say that they even put a yoga dress and even show that.
It's a sign of pride.
Yes.
But the thing is, while being a yogi...
But still, let me explain what you just said. There is collective unconscious.
Yes.
That's precisely true.
Yes.
Because I'm talking about not just America, India, Japan, China. They have their own cultural conditioning from which they come and through which their mind and ego and habits and belief system function. I'm going to the collective unconscious of 7.2 billion people.
Right.
What is that consciousness? That consciousness is each human being is conditioned by their journey, by their ego's journey in the dimension of time in the past. So everybody, the humanity has reached to the level of evolution where ego mind, almost everybody is born identified with their ego mind, and that is now cultivated by local groups in which they live. That is called tribal consciousness.
Right.
Means I want to be part of the tribe. But many people now are waking up from them. Amazing number of people are waking up so that they are coming. That is why I had a great success in the practice of yoga.
So the yoga is becoming more acceptable publicly, true. But the yoga which is being accepted more and more is less and less the real pure yoga. It is also, there's two things happening. As yoga gets diluted, and you mentioned, right, we mentioned right in the beginning, as the West changes the yoga, domesticates it, it becomes more and more popular. So this raw, original, wild form of this animal or this wild plant where in the real jungle, in the forest, has been gradually domesticated, and as it's more and more domesticated, it's more and more popular. More and more people are happy to have it in their garden because it is not so dangerous. So while we can say happily, the good news is that yoga is becoming more popular, but the meaning of this yoga is becoming less and less original and less true to its origin.
What I say is, yoga has become popular, but what has become popular is not yoga.
That is correct. So that is correct. So there's two yogas. There's yoga and there's yoga 2.0. So let's say this yoga, which is now popular, is yoga 2.0. So it's kind of an adaptation. It's a modernization. It's convenient. Pretty soon, one thing I want to ask you, and I want to come back to this so I don't forget. But one thing, well, let me first finish this thought, then I'll talk about the idea of online pran. So please remind me, I want to talk about whether pran can go online. And I don't think it can, but I think there's a danger to that. But I'll come to that in a moment. I want to talk about this tribal consciousness, that all the 7.2 or whatever people in the world are subject to this idea of heritage, birth-based ancestry, where you came from, identities, collective identities, and so on. So everybody's got this problem. But some of these identity narratives, because the identity is a kind of a narrative that you've been told, a myth that you've been told, like the ego has its myth.
Or we can say story.
Story. So like the ego has its story, this collective narrative has got its own story. Some true, some false, some wishful thinking, some exaggeration, all of that mixed in. So these narratives, these identities, are not all the same in terms of power. This is where the word power comes in. Some have had an aggressive expansionist mission with a mandate from God that you should take over the world. Some have. It is written, codified, that you should go and take over the world. So this is the ego which has had the world conquest ambition. Others have ego. The Native American tribes also got an ego because they have a tribal. But they never had this ambition that you should take over the whole earth. They're happy they have the fishing area and they do their own thing. So because there is an asymmetry of power, because the power is not symmetrical, there is an asymmetry of power. The ones with more power, more ambition built into them, have created a second kind of problem, which is a problem of too much aggression and too much hijacking. So those egos, I think, are more important to address right now. Whereas if I go to a tribe and they have a tribal ego, the individual has his own individual ego. So if Rajiv is a Native American belonging to a tribe and you're deconstructing my personal ego, that's good enough, because while I have a tribal ego, it's not harming. It may be a problem for my own evolution, but I'm not out there all over the world trying to assert myself. That's one point I wanted to make before I move on.